Does any one of you have the struggle of answering the question, where do you go from here? That's what's on my mind right now. I've been thinking about it off and on for the last couple of years. I know that sounds really general. So let me give a little bit of description as to what's going through my head. I've had some conversations with different creative people that I know. And there's two schools of thoughts that I've run across. One is that you sit down and organize out where you want to head, whether that's time blocking or drawing up a list similar to one I have, depends on how detailed you want to go, or you just give yourself a general idea of where you want to be in 3 months, 6 months, a year, 5 years, whatever the case is. On the flip side of that coin, there's also just letting the chips fall where they may. And I'm not sure where I fit in between those two. So part of this journal really is just me being confused and a little concerned about how motivated I feel to get the things done that I'd like to finish. Motivation, inspiration, they seem so fleeting, even under the best of circumstances. And to be quite honest, I've felt pretty good for the last few days. Kind of switched up some stuff in my eating regime and my thinking processes. I think I'm making some semblance of motion forward. At least I think I am. But at the exact same time, I also am keenly aware of the fact that there's still a lot that I'm not sure how I'm going to accomplish. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. And my hope here is that maybe somebody has some answers or can speak to their own experiences. Because even other people that I talk to who are working creatives or just people just trying to get through life, have mentioned, no, I don't really know how the hell this is going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen this next weekend or anything. You can plan, you can do that sort of stuff, but it never really comes full circle to where you're comfortable enough, at least the people that I spoke to know, yes, this is 100% where I'm going to be. Now, I do know a few people that have a very defined sense of what their goals are and where they want to be. And they take the time to think about it. I don't know about you, but for me, that is completely anxiety-ridden in a lot of ways. I'm getting better at it because I'm facing them, because I'm writing them down, because I really do want to move onward in either my career or any one of the goals that I've set for myself, because they're important to me. But it's frustrating that I have to seemingly consistently have to remind myself why they're important. The video previous to this kind of showed you guys some fun little looks at some of my collections here in this room. And this studio I built from scratch. It was just part of the area that I had downstairs, and I put up the walls, and I had help doing it, thank goodness, but the walls, the lighting, a lot of stuff here, everything was purchased and bought specifically to build this thing. I didn't even get around to starting on it until I had anguished over it for many years. And I kicked myself when I finally did start, why didn't I start sooner? It's crazy, right? That we do that to ourselves. I hope not everyone does, but I know that I do. I'll languish over something, whether it's got to be perfect, or I want this to be exactly this way, which is exactly the reason why this series exists. Do I anticipate that a bunch of people are going to watch this, especially all the way through? Probably not. I mean, I don't think so. I'd have to be pretty narcissistic to believe that. And again, the whole point and process of this was to develop a series that I could go back and look at over the course of a year and say, I had effectively journaled what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to make some mental notes. I wanted maybe some sort of record. Not gonna lie, a friend of mine's wife passing away suddenly really jarred some reality loose in me, and I thought, maybe for whatever it's worth and for whoever is left behind that cares, there could be a record for however long YouTube is around on here and on the hard drive behind me that would at least capture my thought process. Maybe in about another 50, 60 years, it'll all be deleted or lost. I don't know. It is a weird thing to think that there are people that have passed on or maybe just have stopped producing content, and they've left behind a fairly large library of things on Twitter, social media, in general, really. And I always wonder what happens with a lot of that stuff. What is the legacy? I think the most jarring thing that happened for me was there was a guy that I had found his account, and I was like really enjoying what he was doing. He was an elderly gentleman that was playing guitar. He was so ecstatic because I think he had just finished his studio about 3-4 years prior to the video I was watching. And I was so happy for him. He was genuinely happy in the video, right? He was playing guitar. I remember he was playing, oh gosh, he played a little Beatles, a little Led Zeppelin, mainly some older country, which really was like, hey, that's pretty rad. Played a little bit of reggae tone sort of stuff, just a lot of things. And he was explaining about the different guitars he had, the amplifiers, how he didn't really like effects pedals. He used a rack system. How he was talking about the microphone he was using, but he genuinely was just so happy. And every video I've watched from him, he's been ecstatic and just in a great mood. So then I get to one video and I was like, wow, okay, well, that's really cool. And I couldn't find any more. So I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll wait till the next one gets uploaded. And then it hit me when I looked at the date. And I was like, well, wait a minute. Now, I watched that video. The last video that he had uploaded was in 2021. And then I don't know if it was in the comment section or what. It was a little ways down. Somebody said, it's a real shame, rest in peace. That's pretty devastating. But it also gave me a weird insight into what it's like when you meet somebody online and you have this idea in your head that, you know, they're fine, they're living, they're loving, they're doing their thing. For the time he had, he certainly seemed to be. But it was enough of a jarring circumstance that I thought, well, here's at least something where, yes, he passed on, but I was able for a little bit to glean knowledge, experience, and a narrative from a gentleman who had been dead the entire time I was watching his channel. Now, that seems like that should be not a big deal. I mean, we watch a lot of retro television. There's a lot of TV that I watch, you know, whether it's Pluto TV reruns, my DVD collection, things like that. And there are people on there famous, you know, or even the people behind the camera, long since passed on. So the enjoyment of media is not something that we're immune to the idea that somebody's passed on. When Prince passed away, I certainly still listen to his music. When Tom Petty passed away, I still am a massive fan. George Harrison, all of these other people. But, and even then, that's not to say that when they die, it isn't saddening or it isn't a bit of a reset to the mind. One of my favorite bands is the Traveling Wilburys, and I think there's like 2 members left. The drummer, I actually don't remember who the other member is now that's left over. Yeah, I hope somebody else is left over. Nonetheless, the point is, that doesn't take away from my enjoyment of that. My all-time favorite band is Type O Negative, and when Peter Steele died, I know that they were right in the beginnings of him starting to write a new album. They've moved on. One of them, I think it was not Kenny, I don't remember, one of the band members became an EMT. 2 of the others went on to play in other bands like Seventh Void, and I think Silvertone was the other band. Nonetheless, you see things like that happen and you understand that life goes on, right? Things change and new things come from it. Probably one of the most famous ones is Dave Grohl, former drummer of Nirvana. I mean, you guys know this unless you've been living under a rock. And he founded Foo Fighters. Now, getting away from the people that have fame, notoriety, infamy, or whatever, just take it down a level to, you know, people like me. I have less than 100 subscribers. My social media reach is about as far as this screen. That's it. You know, I have a few more people that follow me on some social media, but for the most part, I'm a blip on a screen, and I'm fine with that. It's really not that big of a deal. I remember there was a point where I used to think, oh my God, I need all the numbers and all the likes and all the retweets. I don't really care anymore. I'm just happy that I can even do stuff like this. Most of it is for myself and for my own record. So there's that. But when I'm trying to promote my business, or I'm trying to grow from there, I'm trying to sell comics or art, sure, having more people certainly helps, because then those people go to shows, and those people meet me, and those people buy things. Or, in its most simplistic format, the engagement is really what we gain when we see something like this. I'm willing to bet that a good number of you that may watch this today or in the coming years may not actually have met me, may not know me. Hell, I don't know. I know this is going to sound super weird. I don't know that YouTube won't be part of some gigantic conglomerate and last for the next 90 years, and someone happens to stumble across this, right? Because we don't really know what the future holds or where our media ends up or anything. I'll give you a really perfectly good example that ties into this here in just a second. So getting back to the gentleman whose account I followed, I'm still subscribed to it. And there, of course, there hasn't been any new content or anything else added on there. And I don't know how he passed on. I know I did a search, but I thought that was too macabre. I'm just simply going to let this go as it was. I wanted my memory to be of that person that I watched enjoying and living his life. And he had a lot of hope. He was going to release an EP. I think it was 6 songs. And I have a playlist of his stuff, or at least I did. I think when I was really depressed, I was deleting a lot of stuff off of YouTube. I think I now have to go back and find that gentleman's stuff, but otherwise I'd be sharing it in a link with this video. And that goes to show how sometimes we don't think through things, we end up doing shit we regret. Nonetheless, during the time that I was unaware that he had passed on, I was listening to everything he played. Just the calming nature of his voice and hearing him share his stories was phenomenal. Whether they were a little bit over the top, whether they were, and none of them were. They were all rather, the whimsical is not the word I'm thinking. They were all really, you could tell he was definitely somebody who had been through a lot. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, Vietnam, like, damn, I was seeing some shit. Not like that. I'm saying, like, he had really experienced life to a really full extent. Dudes like that inspire the hell out of me, man. Because when you see something like that, you go, well, these are people that were willing to break away from whatever boundaries and bindings may have tried to hold them down. And then they move on and do other stuff. And that's admirable. Super admirable. The older I get, the more admirable it is. It's exciting. So back on the subject now, turning it over to the idea of where our media ends up and our presence and how we live on. I know that in an earlier video I was talking about how AI could very much take a lot of what we have, and I don't know. Think about it this way. There's a lot of circumstances where you look at something like wax cylinders that were once used for recording, or even move a little bit further down the timeline, records. They weren't really meant to be used for anything else than being placed on a turntable, whether they were 45s or the smaller sizes. But people adapt and they do things. And we are consistently translating media. Along the way, a lot of it gets lost. Studio fires, the decomposition of film grain, a lost memory card. Things happen. We lose things. Maybe somebody doesn't know how to get the photos off their phone, or a phone is destroyed, or nobody paid for backup. It happens. I've lost a lot of different videos and things over the years. Irreplaceable. Can't do anything about it. Those memories are now gone. Or they're gone from being some sort of semi-physical factor, right? They were a JPEG. Did they ever really exist? Well, one could argue it was a bunch of bits and bytes and the memory lives on within us, but I know enough to know that over the years that I've gone back and looked at all of the media I've ever saved over my life, there can be a lot of challenges in there that show that our memory is not as accurate as we really think it is. And then that self-analyzation from there that you can grab from that is pretty stunning, really. Again, I'm getting onto a different tangent. That's a whole nother discussion. But I remember one time when I was still working security at Shark Bar downtown in Kansas City at Power and Light. I got off work late one night, and I'm going to tell you that if you've ever been to any of the big entertainment districts or even your average bar, floors are filthy. They're terrible. You'll find everything on there, and they're always wet. Well, I had noticed that something was really messed up. I was walking around. I used to wear work boots that were steel-toed and all this other stuff, and thick bottoms because we had to help take out trash. So I always wore all kinds of protective gear. So most of the time, I wouldn't pick up on something small or innocuous being in my fingers or recognize anything necessarily. It was all visual. And especially if you're walking around, I didn't feel anything in my boots. Maybe, there's something stuck, bottle cap or something in the bottom of my shoe. I remember walking down to the trash, and I was like, oh man, I stepped in some gum or something, which is always annoying. But it was late. It was probably about 2:30 or so in the morning. We're doing our trash run. I was helping the bar back get the stuff over to the trash. The way Power and Light was that it's 2 or 3 levels of entertainment district thing. There's a huge stage. Back in its heyday, it seems to have changed a lot more now. And if you can imagine an outdoor mall that's nothing but bars all the way around, the Power and Light concept is a strange one. But anyway, so you have to take the trash from the upstairs area all the way downstairs, take a freight elevator, go downstairs, get to the dumpster, and then come back up. All that way, my foot was sticking to the ground. There was just this gum stuck on there. And I thought, I got to pry that off. It's going to drive me nuts, and I don't want that, ground that into the carpet in my truck. So I get back, and after everything's done, I sit down and I take my boot off. I'm sitting on one of the cushions that they have in the bar, and I noticed, the gum is jammed in there, so I'm taking my little multi-tool. I'm jamming in with a screwdriver and getting on the bottom of it. And here's this little SD card, like a small one. I'd never seen one that small at that time that could survive something like this. I think I had seen them before. I wasn't really interested. I was still buying full-size SD cards. But this was the little micros, right? So I was like, what the hell? Now, being somebody who's a bit of a technophile, and I love all kinds of technology and stuff, I thought, wow, that looks okay. It's got a lot of gum on it. So I quickly found some paper towels and just kind of loosely wrapped it and put it in the front pocket of my pants. I bulked it up so that way I would remember to empty my pockets before I threw all my stuff in the wash. Because, man, after working in a bar even one night, you just want to bleach the hell, just disinfect everything. And I went through my pockets when I got home, threw all the stuff in the wash, and I looked at it. I was like, well, I got a little bit of time to kill while stuff washes and stuff, so I can get it thrown into the dryer because I had to work the next day. So I stayed up, and I took some cleaner, and I managed to get the memory card cleaned off pretty well. Now, if I was smart, which I probably can do that, I think if I am smart and I remember where they are, and those things did not get lost in the last drive loss, I have them backed up somewhere. But if so, I'll be flashing them over this part of the video right now. But I'll go ahead and describe what they are. They are pictures from somebody's trip. These 2 young ladies who went to India to evidently meet a significant other, a friend, or something. And they were all on here. There's even video, I believe, that managed to sort of survive. It looked a little corrupted, of them riding on an elephant and a few other things. I remember when I first found it, I immediately got some of the pictures off of it, and I was like, well, somebody wants this. And I remember the sort of, nobody was really interested at the bar. Nobody cared because, what were the chances? A lot of times you get people that'll come out and they're like, oh, I'm from Vermont. I was just visiting family. I'll never be back here again. But I always told myself in my head, and I probably need to update this to my latest website just because I think it'd be interesting to get these photos back to these people. I think it was for a wedding. There's no wedding photos in it, but just the whole thing, the places they were going, it looked like it was preparation right before the wedding. And I thought to myself, somebody somewhere wants that, right? Because at least right now, I would think and hope those people are probably still alive. They look to be about my age in those photos. Now, it's been quite a few years. And all I could think to myself was like, the more time that goes by, the less of a chance these people are going to find it, the less of the chance these people are going to know anything about it unless something goes viral. So now thinking about it, I probably will go ahead and put that on my website, just a small section, and go, does anyone know who these people are? I found this SD card and here's all these things, and I would love to get this back to them if they want it. I always find stories like that really fascinating, because years ago I used to see things where people were like, oh, I found this roll of film. Oh, I found this really rare brooch. Most of the time it's a photo or something. And it always breaks my heart, because I have photos. I collect a lot of weird things. I have a lot of older photos that once when I was in Louisiana, I ran across a box of, and the name is failing me now, but it was, I think it's stereographs. Stereographic photos are essentially, you take a picture with a camera of, let's say, the Eiffel Tower, and one is slightly to the right and the other one is slightly to the left. They're not, it's sort of an early form of 3D, and you mount it on this thing, and most of them were wood, the real nice ones are metal, and you have this little, they almost look like welding goggles that go over your face, over your eyes, and then you have a scale that it sits on. You can kind of zoom in and out, not to zoom in and out of the photo necessarily, but to bring your eyes into focus, and then you see this image sort of become 3D, and it's pretty startling how well it works. And I was at a flea market in, I think it may have been Sunset or Natchitoches down in Louisiana. There were just all these photos sitting out in a box, just bleaching away in the humidity and the sun. I felt horrible. I got a few of them. I know I have them stored somewhere as well too. And over the years, I've found other ones that I wonder, like, who are these people? What is the story? There were even some at the museum that I worked at that I had found. One time they were sitting out, just, I think somebody was working on a project. And there was one that really struck me because the cat looked a lot like my cat, Luna, who's primarily white with some gray and black spots on her. The cat in the photo looked identical to her. Now, that's not saying a whole lot. A lot of cats can look alike. Hell, there's a cat 2 streets over that looks identical to her. But it was still, who was this cat? What was the cat's name? Who was the young girl holding the cat? Why were these photos taken? Where were they taken? Now, today, if you take a photo and you don't take away the settings on your phone that will naturally enter in a lot of the metadata and extras, you can find GPS addresses and locations and all kinds of things like, this photo was taken here in the middle of South Carolina, whatever. Or you'll find it, along with this is the size and the megapixels and all these other things. That's fascinating. But it kills me that the more advanced we get, the more lackadaisical we seem about the very media that we create. And it's at an astounding rate. Just in doing this, I mentioned this in my very first episode, that if I make it through all 365 days, which is the plan, and I only recorded half an hour, which I've already blown that, and I'm about to blow that time frame right now too. If I do that every single time, I will be at the very least around now 250 to 300 hours. There's every chance I'm going to be at 365 hours, which would be insane. But then what do I do with those 365 hours? They will live on YouTube. They will live on my hard drive. They will turn into something. I just don't know what. And then someday they won't be anything. There'll be a forgotten bit of technology or a drive that gets scrubbed and erased, and that'll be it. And I'm, for the most part, okay with that, because I know there's been other people in this world that have far more valiant efforts and better content than what I have. But it's still sad because even some of those things are forgotten. History forgets so many. We forget history. And history is often rewritten in a lot of ways depending on what's going on, the marketing, the person involved, who the victors are. Let's just be honest. So in that zone, I started thinking to myself, well, what happens when we make all this content, and where does it go, and how do I adapt with that? And sometimes that very thought is mirrored alongside the what am I supposed to do next? I don't know why, and hopefully I'm not alone in this. I will often think about the daily life I have, and not that I feel like I need to chronicle every moment of it, because I know that most people don't care. I feel like there are moments that I feel are important enough to record something about for either entertainment or informational purposes or just my own needs. But the allure of doing stuff for social media, whether you're making a TikTok or something, we tend to express a lot more interest and effort into creating that. And I wonder if life itself isn't dropping off because we are so connected to what we're presenting on screen. I don't know if that's alarming, or I don't know if it's just the new norm. When I used to have students that I taught art to, many of them were so acclimated. They had lived in a world where high-speed internet was the norm and everyone had a computer in their pocket and could make phone calls on it. That wasn't the norm for me growing up. Computing, I didn't see my first actual personal computer until second grade, and it was given to the math teacher who was terrified of it. They figured she messed with numbers and she was smart, so she could know how to work the computer. There was a kid who was over at the high school that came by to show us, and that was the very first time I saw Frogger. I believe it was Frogger. It was nuts. I was like, is this really what I'm looking at? It was really cool. I distinctly remember the frog jumping, so I want to say it was an official Frogger. I don't know. I know he clicked something and he made it do that. And we were like, whoa, what is that? But then he had to go back to showing us some math equations. So nonetheless, it was still a very cool circumstance to think about, like, you know, where are we heading and what sort of stories are we telling and what does media mean for us? It means a lot to me. A lot of what I create is in the hopes that it's either at least halfway entertaining, or it's informational, or maybe it's just supportive in its nature. But in doing so, it makes me think about the daily life and what do I do next? Because when I spend enough time to edit a video or listen back to most of the storytelling I do on this or TikTok or any of the other things I do, even in creating my artwork, right? Because I'll feel like, well, this story has to be right. I want to make sure I'm getting it right. And I'm going to work on some of the scripting later. But I was feeling a little bit of anxiety writing in, so I thought I'm going to go ahead and knock this out now so that I can have a clear mindset to go ahead and do this. Now, hopefully I will go ahead and upload this video. This one's jumping the gun a little bit early, but this was something I really felt like I needed to talk about. So, I don't know. Maybe in the end of all of this, it doesn't matter, right? Maybe it's my own ego. Maybe it's my own need to feel like whatever I have will be remembered or will be more important to a lot more people. And I understand and believe me, if you're even remembered in some small way by a family member, that's probably enough. And I really do believe that. But the reason I bring all this up, and I'll end the video with this, is that it hit me that just as quickly as somebody's story can end, either abruptly or even if we're aware of it, what were those stories? What do they mean? What were they? What stories, what adventures, what things happened to them? And because of that, I think back to a project I did a few years ago when I was still working in one of the companies, and I had access to a large area that had a lot of other people that did other jobs and stuff. And I really clambered down from my social anxiety heights and just engaged a bunch of different strangers. And I started asking questions, and I worked out an entire book of poetry based on stories and things that people told me. It was crazy. I don't think I could repeat that again. Or can I? Maybe not the poetry bit. But this month, I plan on at least getting 2 of the people that I've reached out to get together with me. And it's not going to have video. It's more of a comfort zone where I'm like, I think I just want this to be in audio format. And I will be redoing the programming on my current podcast, Radio 74. There's a lot of experimental shit on that thing. And I'm on the fence as to whether or not I remove it or not, or I just keep adding to a brand new season, which is supposed to start this month. So the idea is I was going to reach out to people that I'd known that do amazingly interesting things within the world of art, comics, pop culture, collecting, you name it. The reason for that is I've known quite a few interesting people in my life. Some of them aren't here anymore. And not unlike that gentleman whose YouTube video I started out talking about in this video, I never got a chance to really meet them, to talk face to face. If you see the nuances in their eyes, or, the grasping of their hand when they're thinking about something. And although I can appreciate having an interview over Zoom, there is something genuinely connective when you're in the same room and you have the rhythm and beat back and forth between two people, or a small group of people, talking frankly, honestly, openly, and just being themselves. So my hope is, my determination is, that I will absolutely lock down at least a few artists, some other people that I'm thinking of, and get together with them in person. And it's going to be real low tech. I finally have enough that I feel like I can take one or two recorders with me, a backup one for just in case, and then a main one. And I'm going to just have sort of an open table round, a round table discussion with open subject matters, a few things. And the idea I have, January is going to be kind of the starting gun of it. And then February will hopefully be where I'm really ramped up for it. But the idea is to do enough content for a podcast that maybe each episode is between half an hour to an hour of listening, and no podcast episode continuation would be more than 2 episodes. So maybe if I'm interviewing person A, that might just be podcast 1, which is about an hour to 2 hours. And then I have to make a decision of, am I cutting that in half? Because I know people sometimes like bite-sized sort of podcasts, which could be 30 minutes or whatever. I will finalize that format, which is something I still need to decide. But I'm hoping that sort of like this, but better, because there'll be other people talking and telling their stories. I'll be able to interview people that I really have always wanted to get their stories down. I wanted to know more about them. Just some fascinating fucking people are part of my life. And that to me means everything if I can get their voices down. So for the final thing on this, I know that is something that I wish more people would do. I will fully admit this. One of my most prized things I have is I was messing around with the recorder on my phone, and I was recording a voice recording for myself. And I thought I hit stop. This was some time back on another phone I had. And I recorded at the dinner table a 37-minute conversation while we're eating of my mom and my dad and me and my brother. There is no fucking worth that I can put on that I can establish in any numerical sense. That is priceless to me. Thankfully, they're all still around. I'm grateful for that, right? I just spoke to my mother a few hours ago. I'm grateful they're still here. And that they're all still part of my life, and we don't want to kill each other out of anger or division or whatever. I'm fairly lucky on that. Not that we get along all the time, but that for a moment there, if you isolate this one lone recording, they were of a certain age, I was too, and everything else like that in that day, right? That will stay there forever. It's almost like freezing time. It's like peeking into the 4th dimension for just a moment, where that 4th dimension is the variable of time, and we are able to perceive it as less linear and more a variable that we can walk alongside, which is what a lot of people would say that is. So that stays. I can go back to that recording, I can listen to it, and I can hear the complaints and the jokes and the arguing of my father getting up at the table and doing impressions, which is a lot of where I kind of get that from, and the theatrics of how he talks, and my mom's sometimes muted but also spunky responses, and my brother occasionally agreeing to something or talking, and how similar he and I sound in the recording compared to my head. I'm glad I have that, because none of my family, I've never even told them I had that recording. It was accidental. I just left it as such. None of my family would really be willing to sit down and record something without, because they're very camera shy, and they're shy about being recorded. And I understand that. Even as introverted as I am the most outgoing member of my family. But I think that even if you're in a circumstance where, maybe you have, I'm not joking, I have all of my cats' purrs recorded, the dogs, video and audio, that sort of thing. If you have members of your family or people that are important to you, take the time to take that photo, to record that audio, to do something with them, silly or otherwise. It doesn't have to be this grand project. It doesn't have to be shit. It can just be something because you care enough that they're there. And then maybe in 50 years, when somebody finds a sun-bleached memory card or an old iPhone, because you know how we are, we love old tech, right? Then somebody will boot that up and look at it, and maybe they retrieve something. In fact, I want to show you guys something here real quick. 1 second here. Okay, so what I've got here was sitting back there underneath my, underneath one of the bits of art here. What I have here is my very, very first digital camera. I did not buy this secondhand. I bought this brand new. That is a Philips. Okay, and I don't think I have any batteries in this one. I do not. I keep my contacts in there pretty clean, but it's 4 AA batteries, and there is a when you open it, it has a screen protector on it. There's a focus point here. You manually focus this bastard, and then here's the shutter button, and then back here on the back there was a dial for the brightness for the screen. This took photos, and I believe it was like 320 by 240. Maybe the high definition on this might have been 640 by 480. I don't know. I don't really remember. But there's all the little controls on how to go back and forth on it, and we get up here close. Yeah, there's 3 settings here, because there's literally fine, normal, and I think, economy. That's what E is. And then there's also a record. Yeah, it's a video camera. That's what the really trippy part is. I think this was anyway. I'm trying to remember. I want to say this did record, but I'm not totally sure. No, I think it may have just been a digital camera. I think I'm thinking of the other camera I had at that time that I can't find anymore. Nonetheless, I'm going to fire this thing up and actually take some photos eventually on this. I thought this was lost forever. And when we were cleaning out some of the stuff from my parents' storage, we found it, and I was like, oh my God. And I finally found like all the parts and everything else like that. This has no addition. This is not a memory card slot. This is where you plugged in the power supply, and then they had a TV output on here. So I know I've still got those wires and things everywhere. Otherwise, this is in immaculate condition. There's also a button down here for a lithium battery, and I've got to double check this here in a second and see, because I think when I power this back up, there may be some photos still on here. I have no idea. I hope they are. These lithium batteries can last for a long time in storage. Thankfully, it wasn't exposed to the elements or anything. So, and then it has a DC input as well too, so if you didn't have batteries. The point behind it was this thing was just the bomb for me. This got me into the world of digital photography and media and all this other stuff. I became obsessed with all the things with file formats and stuff. I have a really nice Nikon DSLR now. It's killer. And, it became something where, even though I'm not much of a videographer or photographer, there's that's stuff that I like doing and I love learning about. And even back then when I got this was, I want to say, gosh, this was probably 1993, something like that. I'm not sure. I want to say that was when that was. I don't really remember. I have to go back and look, because I know I have a photo that I took with a normal 35mm camera of this thing, and it was for photography, my photography class, and I was like, oh, the future, or some bullshit is what I titled it. But this is amazing how this, is something that the best we could do back then was, 240 pixels or whatever in certain cameras. And then, of course, it kept going on and then ended up on our phones and stuff. But I was really inspired by my mom, everywhere we went. I swear to God, I'm going to work on diction. She had a 110 camera. And if you guys have never seen them, it's a similar format to this, just a little wider and a little thinner this way. But you, and then you take a picture. And then she had like hers had this little flash over here on the side. So it was similar to this one. And you had to, every time you took a picture, you had to go like that, and then you would hold it on the thing, and because you had to wait for the flash to warm up again, and then it could take another picture. And she had another one that had a cube that had four like flash bursts on it, and you would turn the cube to take photos with it. So you got 4 good flashes in the dark if you needed it. It was crazy. I love stuff like that. I also love that this came with a tripod mount on it. This was pretty damn high tech back in its time. As far as I know, it still works. Last I used it a few years ago, it did still work. And then I thought it was either sold or thrown away or given away. And I am so glad I have this now. It's just freaking rad. So yeah, that is something you'll see in a future video. But getting back to the whole podcast aspect, that's what my plan is. And then I'll be sharing it on here whenever the episodes come up, because I'd like to drive the listenership up on that and really be able to share some stories. I know that there have been some people that I don't live around that I would love to interview, but the idea is eventually, if I can get enough support, you know, selling my art and doing other things, that I can make that chance, or make that a reality, taking the chance, going out and interviewing people that I've met at shows or other professionals that I've known for years that, you know, we just live in different places, and I'd like to go talk to them and in person do that sort of thing. Maybe at that point for the second season, then maybe it does become both video and audio. We'll see. Right now, I'm just trying to keep things simple so that way I can get things done, because Lord knows I've got a lot of stuff to do. So with that, at the 42-minute count, I am going to go ahead and log off of this, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hopefully I was able to find some of those photos at the beginning of this thing. Otherwise, you've just been staring at me this whole time, and that's depressing. But yeah, no, I don't know if you guys ever had anything like this, but these things were freaking awesome. These Philips cameras were just badass. I loved it. And it's funny, there was a guy, I'll end with this. There's a guy on Instagram, and I don't think I followed him. I don't know if his account is still up or not. He had another camera similar to this one. I think it may have been a Sony. I don't remember which one it was. And he has a whole portfolio of lower res images that he's up-resed artificially, but kept the pixel dimension, which if you do pixel art, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. There is a way to set that up in Photoshop where you keep the basic pixel parameter size to be true to what like 8-bit art would look like. Well, you do the same thing in regards to this. So even though you might print out a 13:19 poster, this is cleanly stretched out and not artificially interpolated by Photoshop, and you get the bitmap look. That is something I am obsessed with trying with this one. I just want to see what it looks like, because I think it'll be really, really cool. So yeah. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. And although I haven't introduced myself again for the last few videos, I am Mario the Artisan Rogue. You can find me on all kinds of different social media and stuff. But for right now, and I won't do that much. That sounded so fucking salesy right when I did that. For right now, this is just a journal that I hope you guys are enjoying, that I'm having a blast making, just for my own sanity. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next video.